Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic, which is what if Naruto fully awakened during the fight with Haku. Part 3, Naruto x Hinata. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Their musings and the squeals of delight from Sasuke fan club, namely Ino and Sakura, were cut short when the names of the next contestants appeared on the scoreboard: Zaku Abumi vs. Aburame Shino. Naruto watched as Shino made his way down the stairs towards the arena and pondered the mystery that was this silent boy. Shino was the second person on his own age group that knew about the Kyuubi, but still, he was friendly enough but about as silent as a grave. Seriously, he'd said more on their initial meeting than he'd said during the rest of the time they'd spent together. Naruto sighed as he remembered all that the bug user had said to him on the balcony and again became keenly aware of the slight scent of jasmine that had haunted him the past 3 days. Shaking his head clear of any thoughts not concerning the preliminaries, he tried, with partial success, to focus on the fights. Down on the arena, Shino had already began his match with Zaku and had managed to corner him with a swarm of Kikai bugs and forced Zaku to uncover his second arm. Shino's expression didn't change when Zaku's other arm blew off and the other was torn apart when he tried to use his Zankuaha, decapitating air wave, to blow away the bugs in Shino. When the boy was declared winner and made his way up to the stands, Naruto could only gape at what he surmised was the most collected person he'd ever seen. He even shivered slightly at the thought of being surrounded by a large swarm of chakra-eating bugs, but was reassured by Kyuubi, who was certain that the bugs would stand no chance against their foxfire. The next match was called and it was to be between Gaara's brother Kankuro and Kabuto's teammate Tsurugi Masumi. The match seemed to end before it even got properly started when the stretchy leaf genin broke Kankuro's neck. Kankuro, in response, turned his head completely around and was revealed to be a puppet that proceeded to squeeze the consciousness out of other contestant. After being declared winner, he collected his puppet Karasu and joined the rest of his team on the balcony. Naruto's hopes of getting to fight on the next round were dashed when the scoreboard announced the next matchup. He raised an eyebrow when he read the names of Haruno Sakura and Yamanaka Ino on the board. Two of the scariest girls I know. I wonder if Sakura-chan is able to win against Ino. The girls in question were descending the stairs together, all the while staring lightning bolts at each other. The fight was a long one. They exchanged blow for blow, insult for insult, until finally Ino caught Sakura with her Shintenshin no Jutsu, mind-body switch technique, only to be foiled by the raging inner Sakura, who, because of Naruto's cheers, reared her very scary head and forced Ino, to everyone's amazement, out from Sakura's mind. By now both Sakura and Ino were exhausted and both decided to make a last-ditch attempt to beat the other down. They both succeeded in quite a dramatic double KO. While Naruto and Team 10 were making checkups on Sakura and Ino, Lee was pumping his fists in the air, cheering wildly at Tenten, who was matched up against Temari. Despite the sheer volume of both cheers and throwing weapons summoned, Tenten was losing badly against the blonde Kunoichi from Sunagaku. After a spectacular shower of sharp projectiles got yet again deflected, Temari seemed simply to vanish, only to reappear and create a miniature tornado that trapped poor Tenten in it. The fight ended when Temari caught the falling girl with her folded fan, making her back arch into an unhealthy angle. After she was declared winner, Temari threw Tenten towards to a wall, only to have her caught by Lee, who jumped to grab his fallen teammate. Temari's tough girl exterior crumbled slightly when Naruto jumped down to restrain Lee from attacking her. While staring her with those damnable red eyes, she shivered when she remembered Gaara's reaction to the loud blonde. He seems to care about his fellow genins, maybe I shouldn't piss him off. The consequences might be unpleasant if I have to face him in the third exam. Shrugging to himself, Hayate announced the next match. Will Nara Shikamaru and Kintsuchi please step down so that we can begin the sixth match? Naruto yawned as he watched Shikamaru and the sound girl make their way down to the arena. He was quite frankly bored by all this waiting, and none of Kyuubi's patience is a virtue kit. Comments really helped. Sasuke was boring too. He kept his eyes on the arena and only scoffed at the level of skill that these, inferior ones, exhibited. Only people he was looking forward to seeing were Lee, Gaara and Neji, and the way things were going one of them would fight, and when he predicted, against Naruto, thusly robbing him the chance to humiliate the Dobi himself. Naruto didn't really care anymore. All his previous boredom had been blown away when Shikamaru used his Kujumain no Jutsu, shadow bind technique, and knocked Kin out by smashing her head to the wall. Well, that really didn't affect his boredom, but the subsequent announcement of the 7th match. It was his turn to fight. Yush. Finally, it's my turn to fight. I'll be facing Kiba. This might get interesting if what Shino said about him is true, and it is judging by how he's been acting when I'm around Hinata. Smiling to himself, he decided to aggravate the dog boy further and walked right to Hinata, where he stopped for a moment before going down. Hey Hinata. Hold a Kai-chan for a while, would you? I don't want to take her down to the fight because she's still so young. He then handed the irate kit to the now blushing Hinata and cast a meaningful glance at Kiba before heading down to the arena. When he got down to the arena, Kiba was already waiting, and positively brimming with confidence. His gloating comment of, "Lucky aren't we, Akamaru? With that loser as our opponent, it's like we've already won," was met with a slightly hesitant bark from Akamaru, who had actually smelled the lingering remnants of Naruto's other chakra from when he'd been demonstrating it to Hinata in private. Despite of his pet's lack of enthusiasm, Kiba continued gloating over his easy victory, only to be interrupted by the now fuming Naruto. "Shut the hell up. And don't bring that puppy of yours to the fight, he'll just get in the way." Now it was Kiba's turn to fume. "You idiot, Akamaru is going to fight with me. He's a fully trained ninja animal after all." This comment only made Naruto to smile, then point an accusing finger at Kiba. "Yeah, well, a loser like you would need all the help he can get, so." Kiba was now beyond furious. Here was the guy who'd been the laughing stock of the academy, standing before him acting all though. And to add to the incentive to beat him up real bad was the fact that he'd begun to suspect that his Hinata-chan might actually like the dork for real. He ordered Akamaru to stand down and said, "Ha, acting all though are you? I'll fight you alone, and because I feel bad for you I'll even end it with one hit." His confidence grew with every word until he noticed that Naruto didn't seem to be least bit affected and that his eyes turned from their usual blue to rather unnerving crimson. Shrugging it off as some weird intimidation trick or whatever, he made a few hand seals and whispered, "Giju Ninpu, Shikyaku no Jutsu. Beast mimicry, 4 legs." He then fell on all fours and with amazing speed leapt towards Naruto, who had almost no time to react, and slammed his elbow in the blonde's gut, hurling him backwards like a sack of potatoes. Smirking, he stood up and said, "He won't be getting up anytime soon, Mr. Examiner." While eyeing the spectators and their reactions. To his dismay, Hinata was looking somewhat sad, and while he could hear Shikamaru's, "Just as I thought," something drew his attention back to Hinata's now happy face. Kiba too began to smile. Obviously Hinata had noticed that Naruto was nothing loser and not worth anyone's, least of all her, time. This fantasy was proven wrong by determined, "Don't underestimate me, dog boy." Coming from his downed victim who was supposed to be out cold. Naruto was standing there staring at Kiba, who had shock written on his face. "Damn, that hurt, he hits like a damn jackhammer. And he's fast too." Grinning confidently to Kiba, who was now telling him to drop the tough guy act, he wiped some blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "I just let you hit me to test your strength. It was pretty pathetic, so really it's you who should drop the tough guy act. You know, use your puppy too or whatever." Naruto watched as his words hit home, making Kiba quiver with rage, and then fell into a defensive stance. Kiba held the speed advantage unless he were to drop the genjutsu from his bracers, and that was something he wanted to keep a secret as long as possible. Kiba meanwhile had formulated a plan. Grabbing few smoke bombs, he yelled at Akamaru and charged. Naruto watched the approaching pair carefully. Smoke bombs. Hey, this should be interesting. Soon enough, Kiba got into range and threw the small orbs, causing a large cloud of smoke to obscure the area. Inside the smoke, Naruto was easily dodging the first few attacks that came his way. This is too easy. I would be beaten up badly if it wasn't for my senses though, but still. Where's that damn mutt? Soon enough he had a fix on Akamaru's location and a pretty good idea on Kiba's plan. Deciding to play along, he dashed out of the smoke towards the waiting dog. Several barks, yells of pain and general sounds of combat later, the smoke cleared to reveal an unconscious Naruto and Akamaru who was happily wagging his tail. Kiba let out a yell of victory and extended his arms to welcome the ecstatic dog, only to have the said animal sink its rather sharp teeth into his arm. His confusion was escalated when Akamaru said in a cheery voice, "You fell for it," and then growled loudly as he poofed into smiling Naruto, who immediately began to spit out in disgust. "Blech, gross Kiba, don't you ever wash that coat of yours, sheesh, tastes like a rotten dog." Up in the stands everyone was watching in stunned silence. Asuma and Kurenai, the Junin instructors of teams 8 and 10, were both thinking, what the hell did you do to that boy, the dead last of the academy, Kakashi? The Junins weren't the only ones impressed though, and their thoughts were best summarized by Hinata's very quiet, "Naruto-kun, you're great." Even though it was all buried under Sakura's very loud, "You're great, Naruto." Sasuke just scoffed at the cheap tricks Naruto was pulling, while Neji found it mildly amusing that Naruto had the gall to complain about taste after biting someone. Back at the arena, Kiba tossed a soldier pill to Akamaru, who was being held by Naruto's clone. The small, white and harmless-looking dog suddenly turned into a red and definitely lot less harmless-looking beast that, after effectively destroying the clone holding him, jumped on Kiba's back. Several hand seals later, Kiba yelled, "Giju Ninpu Jyujin Bunshin." Beast mimicry, beast human clone, causing them both to be covered in smoke. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he pulled into even tighter defensive stance, when the smoke cleared, revealing two identical beast Kibas that immediately charged forward. He was in a tight spot and he knew it, dodging and parrying blows that rained from Kiba and the Kiba-like Akamaru. Naruto was forced into a position where he was vulnerable. Smelling victory, Kiba and Akamaru charged forward while Kiba yelled, "Gatsuga, double piercing fang," and both of them turned into veritable drills that both hit Naruto dead on. The blonde in question fell to the ground with an audible thud. "You always go on and on about becoming the Hokage. Well, I'll tell you something, a loser like you can never be Hokage, but hey, don't feel bad, I'll become the Hokage for you." Turning towards the referee, he continued, "He's finished, no way in hell." He never got the chance to finish what he was about to say when Naruto, who was sprawled on the floor, stood up shakily and flashed a confident grin. "If you are going to compete with me for the title of the Hokage, you should know that you'll be the underdog." Pulling himself to yet another defensive stance, he dodged the Gatsuga again. "He's getting careless, there was no preparation this time, and now that I've seen that one, I won't fall for it again. I'm still at a disadvantage though. I need to get rid of the damn mud, but how?" He smiled deviously while dodging yet another Gatsuga attack and formed a few hand seals to perform a henge that made him an exact Kiba look-alike. Kiba sniffed the air tentatively. There were two exact copies of himself, but he still had the advantage. There, that one smelled strongly of fox. He swung his fist with all his might and connected squarely at the fake, causing him to fly backwards and land in a roll. There was a puff of smoke that revealed Akamaru. Eyes widening, he turned around in a rush and smashed his fist into what had to be Naruto, only to see the Jyujin Bunshin dissolve into an unconscious Akamaru. Turning around totally baffled, he was rewarded with a sight of cloud of smoke that cleared to reveal a grinning blonde who said in a taunting voice, "Think before using a jutsu or it will be used against you. And when in doubt, trust your nose, ne Kiba-kun. Or should I call you Baka-kun?" Up in the balcony, Kakashi sweat dropped. He certainly is something else, using my lines like that. Well, at least he pissed him off. Kiba was livid. The class failure that was supposed to be a pushover had foiled him in every turn. Forcing himself to calm down by biting his own hand, he began to plan a strategy. I'm faster and stronger than he is, so I'll just keep on wearing him down. I'll get a hit in eventually and then it's all over. He smirked, regained his calm, at Naruto, who was now holding 4 shuriken in his hands. Hey, you think something so basic is going to work against me? Naruto just shook his head and smiled. I'm going to try out my new special technique on you. Prepare to get payback for those Gatsugas. They hurt like hell. At that, he threw 3 of the shurikens and a moment later the last shuriken. Kiba, like everyone else, was baffled at this odd behavior until he heard poofs from behind him. Turning around in a flash, he now stood face to face with 3 cage bunchins. It was too late, he realized, when there was one final poof right behind him and then fist connected with his head. With a loud yell of, "You!" the first clone batted him towards the remaining 3 while the real Naruto used the first clone as a springboard. Then the remaining 3 clones kicked him into air yelling, "Uzumaki," where he met the real Naruto's heel that connected to his skull, sending him to the hard floor below. Naruto Renden, Uzumaki Naruto combo, duh. Naruto stood ready in case Kiba would still somehow recover from the beating he'd received. When he didn't and Hayate declared Naruto winner, he turned his gaze towards Sasuke. With a flippant salute that clearly said, "You aren't the only one who can copy stuff and pass it off as their own." A message that Sasuke seemed to understand, judging by his darkening countenance. Naruto headed towards the stairs. He walked over to the awestruck Hinata and collected his pet fox while still admiring the power of the healing salve he'd gotten from her. Flashing her a dazzling smile, he said, "Nay Hinata, this stuff is really great. I mean, it's closing my wounds like nothing I've ever seen." This naturally brought out a wave of blushing that caused the nearby Neji scoff at his weak cousin. For some reason, the announcement of the next match brought a cold knot into Naruto's stomach. He watched with certain amount of trepidation as Hinata was matched against her cousin Neji. A knot that grew tighter and colder when Lee snuck up to him and whispered, "Judging from what I saw when you sparred with her, Hinata is very good, but Neji is the greatest genius born in their clan in the last 100 years. And he holds a grudge against the main house because he is from the branch house." This could get ugly. Down at the arena, Neji was berating Hinata, telling her how she was worthless, weak and unskilled. That didn't quite bury the knot in Naruto's stomach, but it certainly made him feel angry. He'd used his Shinkugan to analyze Hinata's Juken form and had found out that her form was nearly flawless without any major gaps in the defense or in the offense. Hinata only had problems with her confidence, and that bastard Neji was attacking just that. He narrowed his eyes and bellowed, "Stop pretending like you know something, you bastard. Hinata, don't listen to that moron. Just beat the shit out of him and shove that superior smirk of his so far up his ass that he can observe it whenever he opens his mouth in front of a mirror." Deep in his mind, Kyuubi giggled. So much for the subtleties. Seems to have worked though. I swear being sealed in the Kidling doesn't get boring, and indeed it had worked. Hinata collected herself after the loud encouragement from her personal idol, activated her Byakugan and dropped into a Juken stance. "Come Neji Nisan, let us fight." Neji was somewhere between pleased and annoyed because his weak cousin hadn't given up. It would have been delightful to humiliate a member of the main house by scaring her into forfeiting, but it would be almost as delightful to beat one into hospital, preferably into the morgue. He too took a Juken stance and the battle was joined. Up on the balcony, Naruto was watching with growing concern. While it did seem that Hinata was holding the upper hand after her determination had been lit by little encouragement, his eyes told him that Neji was actually toying with Hinata. He winced when Neji landed 2 hits on Hinata's chest, causing her to spit out blood. Hinata then tried to strike Neji only to be stuck in the arm for her efforts. Neji then slammed his hand into her chest again with enough force to send her sprawling on the ground. He looked down at his weak cousin who was coughing blood on the ground and said in a scornful tone, "Hinata-sama, this is the difference in our strength, the difference between elite and loser." Forfeit. Neji smiled to himself. This was indeed quite pleasurable. He narrowed his eyes slightly at the sight of Hinata, who was slowly standing up, and wetted his lips in anticipation to hear a submission from a member of the main house. His eyes narrowed even more and his face turned into a scowl when Hinata finally stood up and said, "No, I don't go back on my word, it's my Nindo." Hinata, her eyes once more pulsing with the Byakugan, charged forward and challenged Neji in combat again, only to be hit repeatedly by Neji. Naruto, whose anger was beginning to spike, began to inch closer to Hinata's sensei. There was a pattern behind those hits. He's trying to kill or at least severely wound Hinata. You have put an end to this. Those strikes are all aimed to non-vital organs, but the combined effect of the damages could be fatal. As he said the words, he could feel Kyuubi's anger growing as well. The seal in his stomach began to slowly leak out bits of Kyuubi's chakra, alerting most of the Junins and incidentally the smirking Neji. On the arena, Neji was happily smirking at Hinata, who was struggling to get back on her feet. He'd hit multiple organs with the Jukin. None of the hits were lethal, but accidents did happen. His smirk waned when he felt a stab of intense anger and killer intent that was rolling from the balcony. Without turning his eyes, he observed the loudmouth blonde, or what should have been him. Instead of the blonde, there was something else, something that actually was slightly scaring. He was Hyuga Neji. He didn't get scared, ever, so instead he got angry and directed the anger to where he felt it was due, to his cousin. Deciding to put an end to this charade, he charged forward, ignoring the yell of, "Neji-kun, the match is over." From Hayate, only to be stopped by no less than 4 Junin. Behind the Junins, Hinata suddenly buckled over, coughing out more blood. With a loud yell of, "Hinata!" Naruto jumped over the railing and hurried to the fallen girl. They locked eyes for a second and her eyes seemed to say, "See, Naruto-kun, I can be strong." Before Hinata's eyes rolled over and she slipped into unconsciousness. Naruto quickly flashed through a few hand seals to activate the only medical jutsu he knew. It wasn't much, designed to be used as a first aid on minor wounds and such, but still he'd read on the instructions that its power was dependent on the amount of chakra the user would expend. Yelling for someone to get the damn medic team there faster, he pumped out vast amounts of chakra into his hand that he held over the spots that Neji had hit. He didn't know exactly how much good he'd done or how long he'd been doing it when the medic team finally arrived. Letting the professionals take over, he suppressed yet another surge of anger that was coming from. He really didn't even know whether it was from Kyuubi or himself, and turned to face the pleased-looking Neji. "Hey loser, cut the pointless cheering on other losers and understand that you are never going to be more than just that, a loser." That did it. The bastard was going down, hard. Naruto began to rush towards Neji only to be intercepted by Lee. "Naruto-kun, I understand why you would want to beat him up." He made a face towards the still smirking Hyuga, "And I completely agree with you, but still you should wait till you get a chance to fight him in a match, not in a brawl like this." Sensing that Naruto had calmed somewhat, he let go of the blonde. "And I too want to fight Neji, Naruto-kun, but should you be his opponent in the finals, there will be no hard feelings. It would somehow be more fitting should it be you." Naruto stared at Neji, his eyes never leaving him. He reached down to a pool of blood that was on the ground. Bringing his bloody hand up to eye level, he channeled chakra into his fingernails, making them grow into claws, and then made a fist, causing Hinata's blood and the blood that was flowing from his punctured palm to drip on the ground. "You are going down." With a final glare, he turned and stomped towards the stairs, leaving the openly amused Neji behind. Up where the Sand siblings were, Kankuro grinned at Naruto's performance. "He's so clueless that it's funny. He hasn't noticed the difference in their ability." This caused Gaara to turn his eyes on Kankuro. He was lucky the green-clad ninja was there to stop him. He said, making Kankuro nod. "That Neji guy was holding back. The blonde sure got lucky." Gaara only stared at the scoreboard that announced that he was to fight against Rock Lee next. Just before he vanished in a whirl of sand, he said, "He wasn't the lucky one." Leaving behind a slightly nervous Kankuro, he couldn't mean that it was the white-eyed guy who. Down in the arena, Lee was furiously attacking Gaara only to have his attacks meet an impregnable defense formed by moving sand. Forced into defense by what seemed to be hands made of sand, he did several back flips and finally vaulted himself on top of the monument of seals. There was a moment of silence, while the two combatants stared at each other, that was broken by Guy's enthusiastic, "Lee, take them off." Lee looked confused. "But Guy-sensei, that's only allowed when I'm protecting precious people." His confusion turned to a look of glee when Guy flashed his nice guy pose and yelled, "It's all right, Lee. I'll allow it." With an expectant look, almost like a small child on Christmas Eve, he rolled down his orange leg covers and unstrapped two set of weights that covered his shins and let them fall. "Yosh. Now I can move like the spirit of youth." Naruto only rolled his eyes. He knew the insane weights that Lee walked around with and was probably the only one who was not surprised at the massive cloud of dust and mortar that blew upwards when the weights hit the ground. Nor was he surprised when Lee seemed to blur out of existence only to reappear behind Gaara to give first blow in a flurry of blows that eventually smashed through his ultimate defense. Tamari and Kankuro were in shock. No one had ever broken through Gaara's sand before and forced him to use the Suna no Yoroi, armor of sand, but they weren't the only ones. Gaara himself was rather shocked at the speed and strength that Lee was using. Lee was shocked as well. With that moving sand and the sand armor that was covering Gaara's skin, there was no way he'd be able to deal enough damage to win before he would run out of steam. He shot a questioning glance at Guy, who nodded imperceptibly, making Lee smile as he began to untie the bandages covering his arms. At this point Naruto was getting very interested. He was about to witness the Omet Renge, initial lotus, that he'd heard Lee and Guy talk about. And there it was. With a blinding speed, Lee made several circles around Gaara and then ducked under his guard to kick him from below, only to follow him into the air where he wrapped his bandages around Gaara. The effect was quite spectacular as Gaara was drilled half a meter into the ground and began to crumble, revealing that Lee had wasted his move on a Suna Bunshin. Now Lee was on the defensive. His body hurt all over from using the Renge, and all he could do, and even that barely, was dodge the jets of sand that would have knocked him unconscious or worse. Gaara, on the other hand, tasted victory and was preparing for a final strike that would make him win when Lee suddenly rolled away without the slightest hint of pain. Up in the balcony, Kakashi and Guy were in a heated conversation about the 8 celestial gates, something that Naruto decided he would ask about later. Lee grew stronger by the moment, small pebbles starting to rise from the ground around him, and then he was off. Faster than the eye could follow, he kicked Gaara into air again, then jumped after him. To a casual observer it seemed as if Gaara was bounced around by invisible hands. Hit after hit rained on him from the furious Lee, who was preparing for a final strike just as the muscles in his hands ceased to function. Ignoring the pain, he forced the 5th gate to open and delivered a jarring blow to Gaara, propelling him downwards. Lee then pulled on his bandages to pull Gaara upwards like a yo-yo while preparing to perform the Ura Renge, Extreme Lotus. His fist made contact with Gaara and smashed him to the ground and sending Lee hurling to the other end of the arena. Much to the dismay of Guy and to amazement of most everyone else, Gaara wasn't finished yet. His sand began to creep towards Lee and then suddenly wrapped itself around his spandex-covered arm and leg. It stopped there though as Gaara paused. Images of his painful past flashed through his mind and the sand moved forward again, then stopped. Gaara dismissed the memories of Shukaku's insane whispers that demanded he feed his opponents to the sand. There were no whispers anymore, no need to kill to silence the unquenchable thirst that was in Shukaku. True, he had killed the rain ninjas, without mercy or hesitation, but they had demanded that they have his scroll, and his sister in exchange for escape. His eyes focused on Lee as more images flashed through his mind, images of Naruto smiling to Lee, who was pumping his fist in the air and yelling, "Flames of youth will unite our villages in peace." He had made his decision and the sand obeyed it, wrapping itself around the boy. Gaara stood up and said, "Referee, it's over." He is unable to fight anymore. Then he, almost carefully, used his sand to place the unconscious taijutsu master on the ground. As he let the sand flow back into the gourd, his eyes widened. Despite his injuries, Lee was there standing in his signature ready position. Is he even human? I clearly heard his muscles snap. Any further deliberations into the issue were cut off by Guy's arrival, who declared that it was over and that Lee was already unconscious. Gaara turned away after he was declared winner and returned to the balcony offering only a commanding, "Shut up," to all the questions that were directed at him by his siblings in Baki. The 10th and final fight soon began between Akamichi Choji and Dosu Kinuta. The preliminaries came to an end with a fight that was somewhat anticlimactic after the showdown between Gaara and Lee, as Dosu easily claimed victory by directing his sound waves through Choji's body and into his eardrums, making him lose consciousness. The Hokage began by congratulating all those who had passed and proceeded to explain that they now had a month to recover, train, and to devise strategies against their opponents. As for the opponents, after a series of drawing lots, the fight schedule was established. To his delight, Naruto drew 1 while Neji drew 2, meaning that they had the first fight. Other pairs were Sasuke and Gaara, Kankuro and Shino, Shikamaru and Dosu, with Temari fighting against the winner of that match. With that and an explanation as to how they could all become Chunin, or that maybe none of them would become Chunin, the Hokage dismissed them for a month's time. Before he could even ask, Kakashi approached Naruto as they stood outside training area 44. "So Naruto, congratulations on passing the prelims. I'm going to leave several scrolls at your for you to study during this month." That caused Naruto's smile to falter. He'd really been hoping that Kakashi, whom he considered to be about the best ninja around, would have taken charge of his training. Seeing this, Kakashi quickly continued, "The Hokage has asked that I train Sasuke, as I am the only Sharingan user in the village. It would make sense. The Hokage also said he has arranged another teacher for you. Your father's old sensei Jiraiya, who was also Orochimaru's old teammate. You are to meet him at the Konoha Hot Spring Resort tomorrow after lunch. He's an old man with spiky white hair. You can't miss him." He gave Naruto a slight push. "I suggest that you rest for today, and I think it would be nice to visit your sparring partner in the hospital just to see how he's doing. Him and maybe someone else too." Somehow the slight suggestiveness of his tone and the way his visible eye cringed caused Naruto to feel quite hot and uncomfortable. Kakashi's eye shone with suppressed mirth. "Anyway, I'll leave you some scrolls that I think might come handy when you go against the Hyuga boy. Remember, he's no pushover, so train hard and all that. Well, see you in a month." Naruto watched with mixed emotions as his uncle vanished in a cloud of smoke after a final wave of hand. As he made his way home for the first time in 5 days, he pondered about what Kakashi had just said. I guess he's right about that whole Sharingan thing, though it's still kinda sook to be referred to someone else. On the other hand, he was father's sensei and one of the Sannin, just like that snake bastard, so that would mean that he's really strong too. Grumbling, he absently stroked Akai-chan while immersed in his own thoughts. When they got back to Naruto's apartment, they cleaned up and headed out for some celebratory ramen at Ichiraku's. 20-some bowls of ramen later, Naruto decided that he would do as Kakashi had instructed and visit the hospital. He was anxious to know exactly how badly both Lee and Hinata had gotten hurt. First thing he saw when he arrived at the hospital was Guy-sensei, who immediately ran up to his part-time pupil and began to yell, "Ah, Naruto-kun, it pleases me greatly to see that you take the time visit your fallen comrade despite burning passion for training that you must feel is needed to fulfill your youthful potential." After few moments and several rather harsh glares from the nurses, he calmed down enough to explain in plain words that Lee was expected to make a full recovery. He had pulled or torn muscles all over his body and there were small fractures on many of his bones, but still, Guy sighed, the flames of youth are strong in this one and thusly he will make most efficient recovery. They expect him to be up to norm in 1 month, but I say he'll be back to it in 2 weeks, and if he's not, I'll run around Konoha 500 times, and if I can't do that, all. Naruto tuned the rest out. He knew from experience that only a blatant interruption could stop Guy, or Lee for that matter, when they went on their rants. He bid the starry-eyed Guy goodbye and went to front desk to find out where Hinata was taken. After receiving a room number, he went to find the said room. When he entered the room, there was no one else there beside Hinata, so he pulled out a chair and sat next to her bed. After a moment of awkward silence, he cleared his throat and pulled out a kitsune plushie that he'd brought on Akai's insistence, and placed it under Hinata's arm. He then looked from her to Akai to the plushie and then to Hinata again and shook his head. Damn it, why is this so hard? I mean, I speak to girls every day and she's not even awake for Cammy's sake. Could it be that No, I will not think about that stuff until I'm done with the damn exam. He cleared his throat again and then said, Well, Hinata, you did really well out there, and Akai wanted you to have the plushie so that you could pet it in her stead and stuff, so I'll be going now, I guess, and we're still on for the ramen, right? I mean, well, I'll be back when you are feeling better and stuff, so bye. Acting as on instinct, he reached out with his hand and slightly touched Hinata on the cheek, and then realizing what he'd just done, quickly pulled the hand away and blushed deep crimson. Phew, good thing nobody saw that one. Whatever possessed me to do it in the first place? Throwing a dark curse at Kyubi, who was now rolling around in barely concealed fits of laughter, he turned, stood up, and walked to the door, which suddenly opened, smacking him squarely on the face. After he regained his senses, he came face to face with Hinata's Junin instructor Yuahi Kurenai and her teammate Shino. Seeing an opportunity to gain more info on Hinata's state, he asked, How is she? I mean, she's sleeping and all, and there are none of those weird machines they keep on really sick people on TV. What happened next was something he really didn't see coming. Kurenai simply grabbed him in a hug and whispered a heartfelt, Thank you, into his ear. When Kurenai finally let go of the confused fox boy, she began to explain. The medics said that she'd suffered major trauma on most of her internal organs. The combined effect would have been fatal, or the very least very severe, had she not received extensive first aid on the spot. She locked her red eyes with Naruto's. You may very well have saved her life with that jutsu of yours, and for that you have my gratitude. Naruto cringed when he heard the words, then his face set in a determined mask. So that bastard Neji was really trying to kill her. All the more reason to whip his lilies all over the stadium. He motioned towards the sleeping Hinata. So when is she expected to wake up, and will she be alright, and exactly when will she be alright? There was some deeper undercurrent in his voice that apparently was not missed by the red-eyed Junin. She's expected to wake up later this evening or sometime during the night, and she should be out of the hospital in a week, or sooner. If you want to visit her, then why don't you drop by tomorrow around lunchtime? I'm sure she could use the company and maybe something different from the hospital food, but that's just a suggestion. She smiled prettily at Naruto, who was now blushing slightly. Now off you go. You have your own training to think about, I'm certain, and congratulations on passing the exam, by the way. She ushered Naruto out from the room and to the hallway, where he was soon joined by Shino, who simply offered his hand and said, I thank you also, she's a good person. With that, the bug user turned to leave, but was stopped by Naruto, who was already formulating a plan and needed some information. Shino paused to consider Naruto's request and decided that it was worth the time it would take. Before parting ways with him, Shino said one last thing. I'm sure Kiba will feel thankful as well. As for the other matter, I'll speak with him. Gaara was staring at the full moon. Shukaku was always most active during this time, but now, this was the first time in his life that he was able to look at the moon and not feel the desire to kill things. He was actually enjoying his very first moon viewing, when the sound Nin Dosu came to interrupt. After the sound, Nin prattled something about trying to kill him in his sleep and the need to eliminate him so that he would have a better chance of fighting the Uchiha. He was growing bored. You know, you are sort of lucky. He's sealed now. He used to get so bloodthirsty during full moon, but now, you only have to deal with me. There was a sudden wave of sand that engulfed the sound Nin, and a muffled cry followed by a spurt of blood when Gaara's sand crushed the poor bastard. Moron, Shukaku might not make me kill things, but I still don't like assassins, much less sound assassins. He was unaware of the two men watching him. So that's the extent of his capabilities. Or should I say that that's the extent of his capabilities, unless it comes out correct. And don't worry about Kinuta, he served his purpose and wasn't all that useful anymore. Hayate perked his ears. There was the Sand Junin Baki talking to Kabuto, a leaf genin who was to be arrested on suspicion of treason. He listened intently as the two men talked about a plan to attack Kohono, only to gasp slightly when he heard Baki declare, I'll take care of the eavesdropper, it's only one rat there, so no problem. The two Junin faced off, and after a conceding, my Mr. Examiner, what are you doing here all alone? From Baki, Hayate launched his attack after performing a few seals and yelling out, Mikazuki no Mai, Dance of the Crescent Moon. An attack that did connect but didn't quite cause the effect it was supposed to, as Baki only smiled. Very surprising to master such a move on so young age, but your blade can be stopped while a blade of wind can't. K's no Yeba, Hayate saw it coming. So, it ends here. Then there was moment of blackness, then he realized something. Sand, there's a wall of sand in front of me, what the hell? He quickly and cautiously navigated around the wall of sand only to see Baki's head, with his mouth covered, sticking out from a cocoon of sand. He whirled about when there was a voice that said, I believe Baki would tell you most interesting things if you were to question him. Looking towards a nearby roof, he saw the sand boy, Gaara, smirking and holding his hand towards Baki. I wish to leave the service of Kage-sama, and join the ranks of your Leaf Genin if possible. It was nearly lunchtime the following day, and Naruto was balancing several takeout bowls of miso and beef ramen along with a bag that held several canned beverages and an additional bag of special treat he'd gotten. He was almost at Hinata's room when he heard a male voice stating, You are weak, daughter. To lose in a fight to a member of the branch house is inexcusable. The voice and the message that the voice conveyed reminded him so much of Neji that he almost dropped the foodstuffs he was lugging, almost. Taking a deep breath, he tried to calm himself, an act that was almost impossible as the male in Hinata's room continued to berate her, calling her worthless and the like. Deciding to take Kyuubi's advice, she was talking his ear off really. He feigned ignorance of any other visitors and kicked the door open, secretly hoping to hit the offending male with it, and burst into the room. He heard Kyuubi making a small snort of amusement when he observed a pale-eyed man, obviously Hinata's father, whirl around in amazement at such a blatant intrusion. Pointedly ignoring the man, he waved cheerfully at Hinata. Oi Hinata, good to see you awake and all. You had us all worried there for a moment. Anyway, I got you some ramen and stuff to make you feel better. I mean, hospital food has a certain reputation. Placing his baggage on a nearby table, he noticed that Hiyashi, as he knew Hinata's father was called, was growing quite impatient from being ignored. Paying the man no heed, he helped Akai-chan from her pouch onto Hinata's bed, where she was promptly placed in a small embrace, joining, he noted, the kitsune plushie he'd brought the day before. Turning around, he acted as he hadn't even noticed Hiyashi before this. Ah, Gomen Hiyashi-sama, I didn't realize you were there. He immediately disliked the man. Not only did he sound like Neji, but he even had the same superior, I'm better than you, so you are nothing to me, look on his face. I brought some ramen, but I'm afraid there's not enough for all of us, so if you'll excuse us. That brought a muffled squeak from Hinata and caused Hiyashi's eyes to narrow visibly. Now Naruto really wasn't sure why Kyuubi thought it was a good idea to outrageously piss off the guy, but he was enjoying himself, so he really didn't care. Hiyashi used the moment of silence to deal with this impudent commoner. It's you who should excuse us, I was just talking with my daughter. He got no further when Naruto interrupted. You mean telling her how she is weak for not winning against someone who is supposedly the greatest genius in the Hyuga clan? How's that her fault? She fought to the best of her ability, and you can't say jack about that because you weren't there to see it, were you? And if she's not the greatest genius in the clan, then that's not her fault either. Naruto almost choked on what Kyuubi was telling him to say. Or am I mistaken to think that you are the one who conceived her? So wouldn't any shortcomings in that direction be your fault? Hiyashi was now visibly fuming. Only thing she doesn't have in abundance is self-esteem, but that's not surprising if your actions today are any indication of the norm. How dare you? My daughter is weak and there's no way around it, and it can't be changed. I only hope that her sister Hanabi won't turn out to be as useless as she is. Hiyashi was livid actually. Not only had this commoner dared voice the truth he himself didn't want to face, Neji was a genius among the Hyuga, he'd also dared to question his abilities as a father, and a man. He was about to defend his position when the boy continued. Now Hiyashi-sama, We have established that Neji has the strongest of Hyuga blood in the past 100 years, so wouldn't it make the whole Hyuga clan look bad when I kick his ass around the stadium like it was an empty can? Naruto stopped to draw breath and gauge Hiyashi's reaction, something which was hard because he'd along the years cultivated a face of total composure. Only thing that gave away the Hyuga leader's anger was a pulsing vein on his forehead. Blah. This is pointless, there is no way rabble like you could ever defeat even the weakest of the Hyuga, let alone my nephew Neji. This caused Kyuubi to smile hook, line and sinker. Now all that remained was for Naruto to say the words, and the blonde said them. Want to bet? If and when I kick the crap out of Neji, you will take back all that crap about Hinata being weak and start treating her like you should treat your own daughter. And if for some reason I lose, well done, you can ask anything really. He flashed out a confident grin to the now terrified Hinata. Kosi little bastard, anything him. Intriguing proposition, maybe if we could incorporate his apparent bloodline into the Hyuga, yes, that might work. Hiyashi drew a breath and cleared his throat. Very well, Uzumaki, I accept, and if you lose you will forget your ambitions of becoming a Hokage and be branded as a member of the Hyuga branch family so that our clan may benefit from your unique physique. He grinned wickedly. Actually, why won't we just brand that weak daughter of mine you are so eager to protect and marry you of to each other? Deciding that the matter was closed at that, he turned to leave only to hear Naruto's cheerful voice yelling after him, hey, you trying to bribe me so that I'd lose on purpose or what? After it was apparent to Naruto that Hiyashi was gone and wouldn't come back, he turned to furiously blushing Hinata. Suddenly realizing how awkward the situation was, Naruto blushed as well. Well, you see, Hinata, sorry, I really didn't have the right to do that, but I just couldn't stand by and let that moron call you weak and all. He scratched the back of his head in embarrassment and then remembered something important. Aha, Hinata-chan, I forgot that I brought ramen, here, have some. Naruto busied himself by pulling out a table that he set near Hinata's bed and placed several cups of ramen on it. Hinata didn't notice though, she was totally out of it. First she was being berated by her father only to be fiercely defended by Naruto, who then made a bet with her father that would most surely land them as a married couple, and if that wasn't enough, Naruto had brought her food and had called her Hinata-chan of all things. Then something else clicked. The boy whom she secretly loved had just placed his only dream on the line for her sake. Looking frantically about, she noticed that the said boy had just deposited a bowl of steaming ramen in front of her and had a carefree, almost eager expression on his face. She began to whisper out, Naruto-kun, you must withdraw from this bet, you can't risk your dreams. Naruto only raised his eyebrow in amazement. He wasn't sure how Hinata would react to bet, but he certainly wasn't expecting her to only worry about his chances of becoming a Hokage. He needed time to think, and luckily the excuse was only an arm's length away. Don't worry about that now, Hinata-chan, just eat that ramen before it gets cold and we can talk after that, right? Trying to set an example, he dug in. After Naruto cleaned out 4 bowls of ramen, 3 of his own and 1 he'd brought for Hinata, who demurely declined the second bowl, saying that 1 bowl was enough for her, he grabbed the bag he'd brought and handed it over to Hinata, who, blushing only slightly, peeked into the bag only to squeal out, cinnamon rolls, my favorites, how did you know? Now it was Naruto's turn to blush, but before he could even begin to explain, Akai cut in. He bullied that information out from your teammate Hinata-chan. That was yesterday when we came to check up on you and brought you that plushie to keep you company. This blatant lie caused Naruto to gasp. He hadn't bullied anything from Shino, just merely asked if there was any food Hinata liked in particular. He rubbed his temples while thinking, damn, I swear Akai and Kyuubi are in league and playing matchmakers. A thought that caused Kyuubi to snort in amusement. He checked the time and noticed that he'd have to meet that mysterious teacher of his pretty soon. Turning to look at the still blushing Hinata, he said, Look, Hinata, like I said, I'm sorry about that bet I made with your father, but it just made me so mad when he put you down like that, but don't worry, I won't lose, so you don't have to marry me or anything. He blushed again at the word marry, but continued, anyway, I have to meet this teacher who's supposed to show me some stuff, so I'll come visit you tomorrow or. Hinata was playing with her fingers and blushing. Naruto-kun, I would gladly become a member of the branch house for you, but you can't give up your dream. Naruto decided that if he was to get any reply from the shy girl, he'd have to administer his patented anti-finger playing no jutsu, and so he grabbed Hinata's hands, effectively stopping the nervous motion. The blush didn't diminish, however. With great difficulty, Hinata was able to overcome the faint that nearly overwhelmed her and managed to squeak out, "Hi, Naruto-kun, it would be nice too, if you would, tomorrow." Bemused, Naruto shook his head slightly and decided that she'd probably faint if he held her hands any longer. So he let Akai get her last petting of the day before collecting the kid and said, "Well, see you tomorrow then, Hinata-chan, I gotta run." So, with that, he left the room only to poke his head through the door a second later. "Oh, and get better soon, okay? So maybe you can help me with my training and stuff. Well, bye again." And then he was gone, leaving poor Hinata in her bed pondering the most bizarre, yet at the same time most gratifying, lunch of her young life. Naruto was pondering things along the same lines when he ran towards the Konoha Hot Spring Resort with an easy lope. He wondered why on earth would his new sensei want to meet at the hot springs though. Maybe he'll teach me some cool techniques involving hot water. At this, images of lobster red Neji entered his mind, causing him to laugh out loud along with Kyuubi. Or maybe he's just an old man who wants to take a nice relaxing bath while planning out my training. Playing through the myriad of possibilities in his head, he soon arrived at the hot springs. Looking around the entrance, he saw no sign of a white-haired man, so he decided to check the inside, only to find them all but deserted. At first he thought he was the only one in the hot springs, but that theory was trashed when he heard an oddly familiar chuckle. It reminded him of the sounds Kakashi-sensei made when he read that perverted book of his. "Oh great, another day, another pervert. I guess I'll just trash that hentai while I wait for that Jiraiya or whatever." Looking about, he quickly spotted someone squatting near the fence that separated the women's side from the men's side. Taking a better look of the man, he could only feel despair starting to creep in. Old man, with a spiky white hair, and obviously a pervert, why the hell do these things happen to me? Why? Feeling somehow betrayed, he decided to vent on the old pervert and snuck up behind him. "Hey you old man, why are you peeping at women's bath? You aren't a pervert, are you?" Feeling somewhat satisfied when he could hear the women running away from their baths, he smirked at the old man who was yelling, "Baka baka baka baka." In utter desolation, Naruto smirked and said, "You are just a pervert, anyway. Are you Jiraiya?" The pervert began a weird dance of sorts. "Thanks for asking, I am, Holy Master Sennin, also known as the Toad Sennin or the Great Jiraiya-sama, remember that?" Seeing that Naruto was clearly unimpressed, he added, "And I'm no ordinary pervert. I gather data at the hot springs for my novels. I'm a writer, you see." Jiraiya whipped out a book labeled, Ika Ika Paradise Volume 2 feet, causing Naruto to point his finger at the book and stutter something. "So you are familiar with my works?" His expression turned gleeful. To think that so young would know my works. This is getting pretty popular, I see." He was totally devastated when Naruto began to yell, "Ah, that's the dirty book that Kakashi-sensei reads. You are even worse than he is if you write that smut." Naruto shook his fist. "And you are supposed to train me not peep on women." Kakashi. So this is Arashi's brat. Hey, all he would need is a change of clothes and he could easily pass for the young Arashi. Hell, even the attitude is similar. And if he has truly begun to absorb Kyuubi, it would be interesting to train him. Grinning as an idea formed itself, Jiraiya coased his head. "Train you? Why should I train you? You are just a brat who interrupted my data gathering. But seeing as you have potential, I might consider it if you fulfill my request." He began to shape a female body with his hands. "Bring me a fruit that has matured like that and I'll oversee your training." Naruto was barely able to restrain himself from strangling the pervert and being sick over the cheesiness of the hentai's request when Kyuubi made a rather evil suggestion. Now he was barely able to restrain himself from buckling over in laughter as he yelled, "Hey Arrow Sennin, I'll get you your matured fruit in a flash, just you wait." As he took off in full run, leaving behind one happy Jiraiya. Hee I was going to train him anyway, but if he delivers some ex-babes, well, who am I to complain, teehee. Only a few moments later Naruto returned and presented the matured fruit with glee, causing a Jiraiya to fall flat on his face. When he got up, his sweat dropped as Naruto was happily and quite extravagantly moving his hands over the large watermelon and chattering about how it had matured nicely. Sheesh, what a moron. Maybe Sarutobi-sensei was wrong about this kid. He began to twiddle his fingers with a lustful expression on his face. You brat. I need babes to inspire me. Naruto's face fell. He really didn't want to resort to this, but apparently there was no alternative. A quick handseal later, Naruto transformed into a blonde girl, causing Jiraiya's eyes to nearly burst out from their sockets. Drool began to fall from the pervert's mouth as he yelled, I like you. Causing Naruto to think he's a moron, the drooling pervert was circling around Naruto, taking in all the details and spouting inane babble. What do you call this jutsu? And, you are a genius. Naruto was sweating slightly. I seriously begin to think that all adults are perverts, he thought while trying to compose himself. Hey, does this mean you are going to train me then? The pervert nodded enthusiastically and stated that there was a condition. Now puzzled, Naruto asked, what condition? Causing Jiraiya to turn around and poke his fingers together. Naruto barely made out the whisper of, you have to stay like that during the training, but it was enough. A vein popped on his forehead as he dispelled the henge and pointed a finger at the older man. You are just a Sukebe, you arrow senin. Quite surprisingly, Jiraiya only laughed it out. I'm not an ordinary pervert, I'm a super pervert. He quickly turned serious. But enough of this entertainment, I was going to train you anyway because Sarutobi-sensei asked. Now let's leave and find someplace more private so we can talk. Few hours later they were sitting on a log in the forest. Jiraiya had proven to be an apt listener, though he had been somewhat too keen to hear a detailed description of Kyuubi's human form, but Naruto shrugged that off as normal for someone who openly admits to being a super pervert. The senin looked thoughtful for a moment. So basically you have to beat up a Hyuga genius in 1 month's time. Normally I'd say you don't have any chance, but considering the fact that you can use Kyuubi's chakra, have a dojutsu that would allow you to analyze his moves, not to mention that you have worn Arashi's genjutsu bracers for the last 2 months or so. He stood up. Meet me here tomorrow morning at 8. I'll have a training schedule for you then, but as for now I need to go see Sarutobi-sensei. With that he vanished in a whirl of leaves, leaving Naruto sitting alone on the log thinking, damn, I really need to learn how to do that. Naruto was feeling content again. Arrow Senin, despite his obvious pervertedness, seemed to be a reasonably strong, and given the fact that he was supposedly one of the legendary Sannin was only an added incentive. Besides that, he'd found a nice surprise when he got back from his meeting with the Senin. Kakashi had been good to his word and had left several scrolls for Naruto to read, including to his delight scroll that contained the Chidori, and an attached note that said only to use Chidori when his Shinkugan was active to evade possible enemy counterattacks. There were also several notes made by Kakashi that detailed some tactics that might be useful against the Byakugan and all the info he had about Neji's abilities. Next morning he was early at the agreed-upon location and so immersed in the Chidori scroll that he didn't even notice Jiraiya until Akai let out a warning yap, which was rewarded by a small piece of jerky thrown at the kid as a gift from the old pervert who'd taken immediate liking of the cute little fox. Well, brat, I hear that your chakra control is good enough, so today we'll try summoning. Biting his thumb and smearing his palm with blood, he performed few hand seals and yelled, Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning technique, causing a large toad with a scroll in its mouth to appear. The toad then handed the scroll down to Naruto while Jiraiya explained, this is a toad summoning contract, write your name in blood and press your fingerprints on the contract and you will be able to summon toads. Naruto was about to do so when he was interrupted by Kyuubi, who bid him to come and visit her. Complying, Naruto concentrated and found himself on Kyuubi's meadow. The said fox was sitting near a similar looking scroll and said, now listen, kid, I've been meaning to give you contract with foxes, and while I can guarantee that they will cooperate, but I can't say the same for toads. You would have to negotiate a deal with Gamabunta the boss toad if you are to sign their contract as well. Anyway, here's the summoning contract, so sign in blood please. Bewildered Naruto complied and signed the contract, only to find himself in the real world where he was being shaken by somewhat concerned Jiraiya. Hey kid, what happened? You just spaced out for a moment there. Naruto explained what had happened to the dubious-looking Jiraiya, who decided that regardless he should sign the toad contract because toads were much cooler than foxes and because Naruto's father had also summoned toads. Shrugging, the blonde complied, bit his thumb open and signed the contract, after which the pervert dismissed his summoned toad. Running few times though the hand seals necessary for summoning, Jiraiya said, "Now, if you really have two different contracts, it's important that you focus on the animal you wish to summon. And now we will practice. Yes. Pull out all the Kyuubi's chakra you can and perform Kuchio's no jutsu." Snickering to himself, Naruto complied and began to pump out Kyuubi's chakra in vast amounts. In fact, he pumped out enough chakra that Ero Sennin decided it would be prudent to put some distance between himself and Naruto, just in case. The decision proved to be wise, seeing as there was a huge billow of smoke that solidified into a very large toad that bellowed, "Jiraiya! Damn you, Jiraiya!" Needless to say, Naruto was more than slightly intimidated by the belligerent, not to mention huge, toad, but steeled himself nonetheless and climbed down to his nose, making the toad raise an questioning eyebrow. "Hey you little punk, where's Jiraiya?" Naruto looked to where the white-haired man used to be but saw neither hide nor hair of the said Sennin. Looking back up at the toad, he said, "Well, he was there just a moment ago. Anyway, are you Gamabunta?" This made the large toad snort in disdain. "It's Gamabunta-sama to a little shrimp like you. Now tell me, why the hell did that perverted geezer summon me, and why is there a weird little punk on my head?" Naruto blinked. He hadn't realized that summons didn't even know who summoned them. Shrugging the fact aside as unimportant, he made a face. "Well, Gamabunta-sama, I actually summoned you." Making a forestalling gesture to prevent the toad from erupting into laughter, he continued, "See, I used Kyuubi's chakra to summon you. I'm the weird little punk who got the damn fox sealed in me, and incidentally the seal has begun to drain the fox into me, so I kinda got more than enough chakra to summon the likes of you." He now got Gamabunta's undivided attention. "Anyway, the thing is, Ero Sennin gave me this summoning contract and all, but Kyuubi had me sign the fox contract. She promised that the foxes would cooperate, but that I would need your approval of this as well." Gamabunta was now serious. Brat, so you are the one who was chosen to contain the Kyuubi. Give me one good reason why I should order any of my subordinates to serve you if you already have a pact with the furballs." Naruto shrugged. He really didn't know the differences between foxes or frogs, with the exception that foxes had tail and fur really. "Well, I guess Ero Sennin wanted me to summon toads because he and my father both had a contract with toads. Other than that, I can't really say. I mean, it's not like I'm an expert on this summoning stuff, this is my first time, you know. But maybe the old man could tell. He's hiding in that bush over there." Gamabunta turned his gaze towards a now slightly shaking bush and bellowed, "Jiraiya! Come out, you dirty old lech! Is what this brat true? Is he truly the Yondaime's legacy?" The bush stopped shaking and Jiraiya popped out and began to tell an abbreviated version of Naruto's life. After some 10 minutes of explaining, the toad boss let out a bellowing laugh. "You are interesting, you little punk. I'll let you become my subordinate, and if you need the help of my kin, we will answer your call. Now get off my head so I can leave this place." Naruto jumped down and Gamabunta vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving ecstatic Naruto and unnerved Jiraiya behind. "Well kid, I guess you did better than I expected with that. I was actually thinking that summoning might take you longer to learn, so that'll be all for today, but feel free to practice summoning in whatever it was that you were studying earlier." The pervert waved his hand and left, thinking, "Arashi, my boy, your kid is certainly something else." He even befriended the Gamabunta. But now for the important things. To data gathering. he began to chuckle pervertedly while walking in the general direction of Konoha bathhouses. Naruto stayed behind and began once more to study the Chidori scroll. By dinnertime he was hungry, tired and happy. He'd advanced noticeably due the similarity between his foxfire and the Chidori, and was now capable of performing the initial stages. He still lacked control due the vast amounts of power needed to perform the jutsu, but that would come in time, now if he only could learn to perform the Hiraishin. Looking about, he noticed to his dismay that Akai was feasting on a rabbit she'd hunted down on her own and didn't look willing to share, so he picked up the kid and her meal and headed home for a meal of his own. Having filled his stomach with sweet and sour pork, rice and vegetables, he decided that a visit to the hospital was in order. He wanted to check on Lee and Hinata. Pondering again on the mysteries of emotions, he headed towards the hospital. This went on for a week. He would train with Ero Sennin during the days, perfecting his techniques and learning new ones. Jiraiya actually knew the principle behind Hiraishin no Jutsu, and had begun to explain this to the eager boy. To further his understanding in the technique, Jiraiya taught the boy how to perform Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, that produced a similar only weaker effect of Hiraishin. At the end of the week, Naruto had pretty much mastered the use of Shunshin and Chidori, and had actually managed to correctly perform Hiraishin 3 times, out of the 100 or so times he tried. And then the week was over. He found out that Lee was already released and was slowly trying to get back to his brutal training regimen, and that Lee was actually eager to help him train against Neji. Something which he politely declined, saying that he couldn't accept the offer for another week at least, lest he aggravate Lee's injuries. This seemed to deflate Lee slightly, but he quickly bounced back up, declaring that he would be better than ever after 1 week, and if he wasn't, then he'd. Naruto sighed. Some things never changed. Other thing that changed during the week was that Hinata was released from hospital but restricted from doing anything strenuous for at least 2 weeks. She then did something she considered daring, and brought Naruto and herself lunch the following day, something which Naruto readily accepted. Jiraiya didn't complain either. His policy was that there were never too many women around, especially adorable girls like Hinata. This went for another week until the damnable pervert asked Naruto to share some details about his cute little girlfriend, something which resulted in a seriously pissed off Naruto and painful beating by 2 chakra-composed tails. The question itself wasn't the only thing that had pissed him off. It was the frustration on whether or not he actually felt any affection to Hinata as a person, or did he feel something for her because she knew about Kyuubi and had accepted him. Naruto was so entangled in the layers of this question that he didn't even notice Hinata until he heard a soft "Anyo, Naruto-kun, I brought lunch." Letting out a sigh, Naruto turned around and decided that he really needed to talk about this with Hinata right now, well after the lunch anyway. TBC, in the first half of next week or something. Author's rant. Suck on the cliffhanger, people. BWAHAHAHA. Anyway, I said that this was going to come out in 2 to 4 days, but it turned out to be 5 days. Well, the reason is that I got lost on the road that is life, and the fact that this is clearly the longest chapter yet. I actually was thinking of chopping it in 2 but decided against it. The Hokage rubbed his temples. The last 2 weeks, since they found about the Sound Sand Alliance, and their plan to wipe out Konoha during the Chunin exam finals, had been stressing. Finally, though, there was some release from the tension. The Sand Junin Baki was standing before the Sandaime and was giving his report. Hokage-sama, I successfully delivered the plans to the case cage, and judging from my observations, they do not suspect that we know about their intentions. The old man sighed and began to fill his pipe. And they didn't suspect foul play then. He cast a cursory glance at the smiling Junin and then observed his pipe, mumbling something under his breath, and lit the pipe with an academy-level Kaden Jutsu. Baki scratched his chin. Hokage-sama, his voice changed its pitch. While it was not easy to maintain a triple-layered henge, I'm not called a genjutsu specialist for nothing. Yuahi Kurenai's smile widened. It took some concentration to keep up the henge in those damn winds though, what with Baki's preference for billowing clothes. The Hokage grunted in approval. Indeed, Kurenai-san, the Wind Country is aptly named. As for the other matter, I'll trust your judgment. He cracked a smile. Now I suspect you wish to check on your team. Yes. I believe you will find Aburame Shino training for the finals with Inuzuka Kiba in the woods. As for your third charge, Hyuga Hinata was released 5 days ago and has spent her afternoons helping a certain blonde genin in his training. This caused Kurenai to raise an eyebrow in amazement. Hinata-chan actually managed to gather enough courage to go visit him, or did he perhaps ask her? I think I'll check on those two. But not before I take a soak in the hot springs. Yes, a good long soak. She sighed in anticipation of a well-deserved bath and took her leave. Half an hour later, the Junin was relaxing in a spacious hot spring sipping sake. It would have been perfect had she not been so immersed in the enigma that was Uzumaki Naruto. The dead last of the academy, someone who had been unable to create a viable bunshin, was now in the finals of the Chunin exam. She sighed, having never really paid attention to the boy, beside his pranks that is. She never had held any animosity towards him for having the Kyuubi sealed in him, but hadn't really even acknowledged him as a human being. She sighed again. No matter how you looked at it, the kid didn't deserve what he'd gotten. Abuse and all that, and yet, he wanted to protect everyone, to become the Hokage of all things. And how he had impacted on her team, beating up Kiba and hopefully teaching him a lesson about overconfidence. Not that Uzumaki was the best example of a cautious person. And then there was Hinata, the ultra-shy girl who had great potential yet not the strength of will to achieve it, or so she had thought. Only a brief exposure to Naruto had made her fight against a superior opponent with a grace and determination she had never seen before, and to think that Hinata was now actually confident enough to train with Naruto. I wonder what happened at the tower and at the hospital the day before I left for Sunakager. All I got out from Hinata was blushes and stammering about a bed and branch house or whatever. I really need to look into that too. I can't concentrate on relaxing when I'm out of the loop about my students. With that final thought of resignation, the red-eyed Junin decided that she had soaked enough and that it was time to go find her shy student and the loudmouth, dead last, who had so effectively captured her heart. Naruto was poking his lunch nervously. He was hungry but didn't have the appetite. He was still too engrossed in exactly how he should and what he should say to Hinata. Sighing, he tried to eat again only to freeze with the food halfway into his mouth when Hinata, who had noticed his unusual mood, asked, "Anyo, Naruto-kun. Is there something wrong with your bento?" The blonde shook his head slowly and put down his lunch. Hinata, look. Someone told me some stuff about you and then Ero-senin asked something stupid today and I'm kinda confused right now so. He looked around nervously and then blurted out. Someone said that you might be, in love with me, so I was just wondering because, Hinata felt her world crumbling. The most closely guarded secret of her young life was now out in the open, and apparently Naruto wasn't all too pleased. Why else would he question her so? She really wanted to die right there and then before Naruto could brush her off, but that was unlikely even though there was a pain building in her chest. She considered bolting but decided that she couldn't outrun Naruto, so the only option was to confess and take the rejection and move on with her miserable life. Not that anyone could ever like a shy and weak weirdo like herself. Sadly, she muttered out, "It's true, Naruto-kun, but don't worry about it. I understand that you couldn't possibly like someone like me, so I'll just leave." Naruto was dumbfounded, then got angry at, himself mostly. He really wanted to smack himself silly for not making any sense, but he really didn't know what he was getting anyway. One thing he did know though, and that was that he'd just screwed up big time. Almost reflexively he managed to grab Hinata's arm, causing the shy girl stop in mid-sentence when he burst out, No, you got it all wrong, Hinata. What I mean is that growling out in frustration he slapped his forehead. Look, Hinata, no one, and I mean no one, has ever said stuff like that to me, and I haven't really told you much about my life. It hasn't been pleasant. So anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that I like you and stuff, but I don't know if I like you, like as in, like you, if you know, erg. At this point Hinata was utterly confused and more than slightly hopeful. He likes me, he likes me. And maybe even more, oh I just wish. Gathering her courage she began. Anyo, Naruto-kun, maybe you should take your time and focus on the exam. Her voice started to fade as she noticed the vigorous nodding coming from Naruto. The blonde was nodding even harder. That's right, Hinata-chan, you know I had a crush, or I thought I had a crush, on Sakura-chan. And then, well, you know, I told you about the dream I had after the seal was activated, right? So anyway, I noticed that I had just chosen to get a crush on her mostly because she was, and is, one of Sasuke Tem's fangirls. And I just want to make sure I'm not fixating on you right now just because you know about, well, he patted his stomach. I mean, you are a great person, and the very least I would be privileged to call you a friend, and even if I was, well, I mean, I have to fight your cousin in less than 2 weeks and I have to win too, so that this conversation won't just become trivial, right? He then flashed a dazzling, and relieved, smile at Hinata, who was staring at him in shock. So, I just really wanted to point this out because it's been distracting me, and well, now I feel a lot better. And you think maybe we could talk about this after the exam and all? Hinata just stared, unblinking. He really thinks I'm a great person and that he wants to talk about this later, but how bad has his life been if no one has ever? She shook herself out from the reverie, noting that Naruto was looking at her expectantly. Smiling shyly, she poked her fingers together and nodded. Naruto-kun, it's okay. It really is, and we should concentrate on your fight with Neji-Nisan. I'll be able to help you train more after the doctors say it's okay for me to spar again so you can train against the Jukin. This interesting conversation didn't go unobserved, however. In fact, it was observed by no less than 5 different individuals. An old man who was wearing Hokage robes, peering into a crystal ball and smiling somewhat happily at the antics of the 2 teenagers. Another old man was giggling to himself and thinking that he should stay after the exams to train Naruto, and to gather some hot data about the fox boy and his soon-to-be girlfriend. Yuahi Kurenai was sitting in a nearby tree, under a genjutsu that allowed her to mask her presence with ease. She really didn't know whether she should strangle Naruto, yell at him, or pat him on the back, or maybe I should explain to Hinata that he is a baka who doesn't know jack about girls. Then again, maybe she already knows that, and if she knows about the Kyuubi, then she might actually appreciate the concern of finding weather. Now I just wonder what that damn bed is. Her thoughts about the foolishness of youths was cut short when she suddenly noticed that there was someone in the tree with her, 2 someones actually. Whirling around in a rush, she came face to face with 2 foxes, both apparently under a similar genjutsu as herself. She blinked. Why were there foxes in the tree with her? And then promptly lost her balance and fell to the ground when the smaller of the 2 foxes stated in a cutesy voice. Now Kurenai-san, it's not nice to eavesdrop on private conversation. Needless to say, both Naruto and Hinata jumped up in embarrassment when they heard a loud cracking sound followed by a rather painful looking, and sounding, landing of Hinata's Junin-sensei. Both were actually happy to get away from the awkward subject they had been discussing, both incidentally vowing to get back to it after the exams, but rather embarrassed at the possibility that someone had heard their discussion. Hinata was the first to stammer out a quiet, "Kurenai-sensei, what happened?" Naruto already knew what had happened, or could very well guess. He had immediately, after having recovered from the shock, begun scanning the tree from which the Junin had unceremoniously dropped from, and had soon enough noticed his Imouto-chan, and her trainer for the day, Kashokumaru. Kashoku is brown, a brownish-red kitsune summon, who was supposed to instruct her in the finer points of scouting and hunting. Shaking his head ruefully, he motioned them both to hop down from the tree and then pointedly asked if they had done with the lessons and shooed them back to the forest. He watched as the 2 foxes turned around and headed back to the forest, only to blend in the environment a few steps, and in Akai-chan's case a last glance and a mischievous wink, later. Naruto then turned about to face the inevitable questions and glances or whatever that would come from the down Junin. He wasn't disappointed. As soon as Kurenai's red eyes locked with his blue ones, there was a demanding, "Did that fox just speak?" He didn't even have time to start when another question was fired at him. "And what's this bet I heard about, on your fight against Hyuga Neji?" He tried again only to be foiled by. "And where did that huge brown fox come from?" Naruto was now sweating slightly but decided to cut in before there would be any more questions. Anyo Kurenai-san, maybe I should explain things from the start. You see, we were in the wave country and he began explaining it all, leaving out only the extent of his current abilities. From wave country, through the exams and finally into the bet he'd made with Hiashi. At this point Kurenai had to fight yet another internal struggle as to whether she would strangle Naruto or pat him on the back. Taking the middle road seemed to be the best bet right now, so she simply raised an eyebrow and said, "Well, I've got only one piece of advice to you, don't lose." The insinuation was not lost on Naruto. "Win or else." Naruto, feeling somewhat slighted, burst out, "Ha! Hyuga genius or not, no stuck-up snob like him is going to beat me. Besides, even if there was no bet, I promised I'd take that bastard down and I never go back on my word." This naturally made Kurenai smile slightly. She'd seen that same attitude when Naruto went against Kiba. The thing was that Neji was in an entire different level than Kiba. She shook her head and decided that maybe she should just let the two be for now and focus on prepping Shino for the exam. Bidding her goodbyes and wishes of good luck with the training, she left them for their own devices. After she disappeared in the woods, a silence descended on the clearing. Both teenagers were alternating between staring at the ground and stealing glances at each other. Surprisingly, it was Hinata who, while playing with her fingers, stammered out, "Anyo, Naruto-kun, I have my doctor's checkup tomorrow just before lunch, so I was wondering if you could take a pause in your training and, come with me because hospitals." The rest of her sentence would have been inaudible to most anyone but not to Naruto, who smiled happily at Hinata. "Hey Hinata, I know what you mean. Never been to a hospital really before I came to check on you, but I can definitely see why that place would make someone nervous. The smell of sickness there." He made a face and waved his hand in front of his nose. Seeing her blink in confusion, he continued. I mean, these kitsune senses are all well and good, but still, I'd wish some places would stink less. The hospital, for example, stinks of disinfectants, sickness, blood and, well, death." Hinata was torn between being elated and mortified. She'd forgotten about Naruto's superhuman senses and had blurted out that she was afraid of hospitals. Then again, he was more than understanding and didn't scold her for being such a baby. Hopefully she glanced at the boy and asked, "Anyo, so tomorrow at 11 then, I'll bring lunch." Naruto waved her off. "Nah, let's go to Ichiraku's after your checkup if that's all right. I mean, that place is probably in destitute because their best customer has been up here training for the last 2 weeks." He made a face in mock concern. "So let's take it upon ourselves to save the old man from poverty." Hinata couldn't do anything but smile. She even let out a small giggle which faded away quickly when she noticed Jiraiya-sama, or Ero-Sennin as Naruto called him, emerging from the woods. The pervert made his way towards the pair and said, "Hate to break you two lovebirds up, but if your lunch is over, I need to teach, or at least try to teach, this baka a few tricks." Hinata blushed badly and began to gather up the remnants of their lunch while Naruto, also blushing, cast a sharp glare that promised pain towards the old pervert. After he bid Hinata goodbye and yelled, "See you tomorrow." After her, while madly waving at the departing girl, he turned to glare at Ero-Sennin. "So what was so important that you had to break our lunch session? I mean, aren't you supposed to be gathering data, or getting pummeled by the women who catch you gathering your data, or whatever? You haven't showed your face after lunchtime since day one." He crossed his arms in a huff. "And what the hell were you calling us lovebirds of all things? We're just friends." The last part came out somewhere between a yell and a desperate growl. something which Kyuubi and the old man both found quite amusing, and thoroughly unbelievable. The old man smirked in amusement and ruffled the irate boy's hair. Well now, I actually heard your little discussion, so that's why. And as for why I'm not gathering data, something came up. He sat down. There's something that requires my involvement and thus I won't be able to oversee your training too much in the next few weeks. However, I wasn't planning on teaching you any new jutsus anyway. I actually think you should now focus on mastering the ones you know. Kirigakur no Jutsu, or Shunshin won't work against that Hyuga. Doden, Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, Earth Release, Inner Decapitation Technique, might work, but then again the Hyugas tend to train their own to anticipate attacks from underground. Jiraiya began to fill his pipe. Your best bet would be to swarm him with clones, though even with your recent taijutsu training he'll tear through them unless. He lit the pipe and began to nod to himself. Yes, that might actually work. Naruto was getting agitated. The old pervert knew some super way to kick Neji's ass and wasn't even telling him. Swiftly he decided on the course of action and bonked the old man on the head while yelling, "Oi Aro Oyaji, just spit it out already." Jiraiya simply shook his head and muttered something about impudent brats or the like before continuing. Well, from what you told me you favor using your clones when you fight. The problem with them is that they aren't as durable as you are, right? One strong hit, even if they manage to block it, is enough to destroy a clone. So, Naruto was getting really impatient. Kyuubi's fits of giggles and baka kit comments weren't really helping either. Shaking his head again at the stupidity of the blonde, the old man continued, "Look, moron, just learn to dodge instead of blocking. Now I'm sure your friend Guy has some funky ideas in that regard, just don't start wearing that green spandex of his or I'll have Gamabunta sit on you." He stood up and dusted himself a bit. "Now I'll be checking on you every few days, so if you have any questions I'll answer them. Other than that, just train your taijutsu and try to work on that dodging and you should be fine. Also, you might want to keep on practicing the Chidori. Especially you should try using it in conjunction with your clones, 12 or so of you each with his own Chidori. Probably would make even Orochimaru tempt to back off real quick." He smiled at the boy and ruffled his hair again. "Anyway, I'm off now, so you take it easy and don't overwork yourself for the last week before the finals, and seriously, take your cute girlfriend out someday too." Naruto threw a stone at the hastily retreating back of that damn pervert and mumbled a few choice curses at perverted hermits and meddling demons. He thought about Jiraiya's idea on learning dodging. Sure, he could dodge some, but preferred blocking as it usually put you on a better position to retaliate. He has a point though. Lee tore through my clones like nothing and it was one hit one clone, even if they managed to block. And if that Jukin is anything like Hinata-chan said it would be. Sigh, I guess I'll have to go see Guy and Lee and ask if they know a quick way to learn dodging. If they do, I just know that it's going to hurt a lot. Next day, after a brief visit to the Konoha hospital, Naruto and Hinata were eating at the Ichiraku ramen stand. Between bites, or in Naruto's case bowls, of ramen, they were discussing Naruto's upcoming dodging 101 feet as Guy had called it. Hinata was somewhat dubious as to whether or not it would work, but if Naruto was willing to try it, guess I'll have to study some more medical jutsus tonight. Poor Naruto-kun is bound to get hurt pretty bad. She nodded shyly to the loud boy who was at the time slurping down his 15th bowl of ramen and agreed to meet him and Rock Lee the following day at their usual location. Around noon the following day, Hinata arrived to Naruto's usual training spot laden with enough food to feed a small army. She stopped at the edge of the clearing, hiding behind a tree almost instinctively, and watched as Naruto did some light warm-up exercises. That was when she suddenly realized what was different. I don't need to do what I've always done. I don't have to hide here and watch from distance. I can just walk right up there and join the practice, though watching him without his vest on is. She blushed at the thought and mentally hit herself with a newspaper while yelling, "Bad Hinata. Bad." Thankfully she managed to get her blush down just in time or she would have been caught red-handed, and would probably have died from shame, as Rock Lee came running from the woods with an enthusiastic smile. Adjusting a large and heavy bag on his shoulder, he shouted a loud greeting to Hinata-san, and Naruto-kun managed to inquire about Hinata's health and spout his usual about the passion and flame of youth and such, all in one sentence. Hinata just smiled shyly and nodded to the Green Beast Jr., as they both walked up to Naruto, who was now smiling happily at them. After a light lunch, Hinata had really brought a lot of food because she surmised Naruto would need the extra energy. They began dodging 101. Several hours passed and finally the lesson was over for the day. Lee offered to help Naruto home, but he waved him off, saying that he was just fine and they should continue the next day. The spandex-clad genin nodded happily and did his nice guy pose, promising to be there the same time tomorrow, and then vanished in a blur of green. Naruto, on the other hand, simply collapsed. He was bloody, bruised, and felt like he'd gone through a ringer. Oh man, this is worse than I thought it would be. Seriously, I can understand the idea, but why the hell do you have to use fist-sized stones in this exercise? Wouldn't rubber balls or something be better? Then again, stones are easier to come by, and guy said something about this toughening me up or whatever. I'm too tired to even think of using any medical jutsus. Maybe if I tap into Kyuubi's chakra, that has always made me heal faster. His ponderings were interrupted by Hinata, who had initially been rather reluctant to throw stones at the boy she loved, but had at Naruto's prompting put some more strength into the throws. Anyo, Naruto-kun, I studied some medical jutsus while I was at the hospital, and if you want, I could try and heal some of those bruises. Seeing the relieved look on Naruto's face and hearing an encouraging, "It would be great practice," from him, she flicked through the hand seals and put her hands on Naruto's chest. Naruto began to feel better almost instantaneously. Warmth was flooding into his sore body from Hinata's hands that were gliding over his chest, and there was also a slight tingling sensation from when the medical jutsu began to work on his bruised flesh. He couldn't help it. He was way too tired and the feeling of warmth was overwhelming. He yawned, and then promptly fell asleep on the ground he was lying on. This, however, went unnoticed by Hinata, who was concentrating on healing the bruises and desperately trying to control her blush, at least to the point where her hair was not in danger of catching fire, as she gently moved her hands across Naruto's bare chest. After 15 minutes of healing, and not so slight blushing, she was done and looked at Naruto expectantly, only to finally realize that the blonde had fallen asleep at some point of her ministrations. She blinked several times and on impulse did something she would never have dared to do. Courageously she reached out and caressed Naruto's hair. Only to jerk her hand back in fright when Naruto tossed his head slightly at the touch and mumbled something. The shy Hyuga was torn. She knew that lying on ground after a hard workout was far from being healthy, but on the other hand, he looked so peaceful just lying there with a hint of a satisfied smile on his face. Again the urge to touch his face overcame her, and she reached only to hear a voice that nearly made her jump out from her skin. "Nay, Hinata-nichan, did Naru-nichan fall asleep?" She quickly scampered on her feet and looked at the now amused Akai, who was in the process of poking Naruto's torso with her forepaw. Hinata was again blushing. "I hope Akai-chan doesn't think I'm some kind of weirdo because I touched him when he was sleeping." She began to play with her fingers again before stammering out, "Anyo, Akai-chan, do you think we should wake him up? I mean, he worked so hard and he could catch a cold or." Akai was now sitting on Naruto's chest and was poking his chin with her forepaw. She turned and peered at the girl mischievously. "Nay, Hinata-nichan, poking him usually doesn't do the trick if you want to wake him up. Usually I need to lick his face or ears before he does so. Go ahead and don't mind me." She did her best imitation of a foxy grin at the furiously blushing girl and began curl up in a ball on Naruto's chest. Burying her nose into her bushy tail, she said, "Though I think it would be best to let him sleep until it's dinner time. Judging by the smell of sweat that on him, I'd say he's had a exhausting few hours, and he won't catch a cold, I think, what with Kyuubi-sama being merged with him and all." With that, the little kid closed her eyes and let out a small purr of contentment, leaving Hinata to stare at the sight. She blushed again at the suggestion that she lick Naruto's ear to wake him up. I can't just leave him here either. It would look really odd if I just vanished, so maybe I'll just read little more of that medical scroll. She nodded to herself and sat near Naruto and began to read her scroll, casting occasional glances at her sleeping hero. As Naruto was slowly making his way towards wakefulness, he became aware of two things. First, there was someone softly nibbling his ear. And second, there was a faint scent of jasmine. Hinata, is she? Still less than half awake, he moaned out, "Ah, Hinata-chan," eliciting a gasp from the Hyuga girl and a triumphant, "See, I told you he would have liked it if you did it." From Akai-chan. Snapping his eyes open and bolting upright, Naruto surveyed his surroundings. There was smirking Akai and beet-red Hinata. He began to back out frantically while blushing and trying to stammer something frantically, only to be cut off by Akai's, "Naru-nichan, did you think it was someone else?" Hinata, on the other hand, was somewhere high above Cloud 9. Naruto-kun thought it was me and looked like he was having a good time too. She then looked shyly at Naruto only to notice that he was still sporting a deep crimson face and had trouble forming most basic words. "Wow, he's really out of it. I wonder, did I or do I act like that when I try to talk to him?" Suddenly she saw herself beside Naruto, twiddling her fingers and trying to stammer out words. "Oh, Kami. I probably do." The image was so hilarious that she couldn't stifle a slight giggle, which opened a floodgate of giggles, and soon she was laughing so hard that she actually had tears in her eyes. Naruto, after some initial confusion, realized just how stupid he probably was acting and began to laugh too, albeit embarrassedly. After a good few moments of laughter, they both began to calm down. Hinata was first to smile shyly at Naruto. "Ah, Gomen, Naruto-kun, I didn't mean to laugh at you, but it was just that, you looked so." The blonde was scratching the back of his head somewhat sheepishly. "Yeah, I know. I mean, that was kinda embarrassing and everything. But you know, this is one of the few times since I was a kid that I actually managed to make someone laugh without deliberately goofing off." He cast a mock glare at the little kitsune that's still rolling on the ground making little yapping sounds. "Anyway, I didn't mean to fall asleep or anything, but I have to say that, your medic skills are good at least." He flexed his arms a bit and glanced at the sky. "Oh well, anyway, we should probably be going, seeing as it's getting late and everything, so." The next day was pretty much the same. Naruto was jumping and dodging around a continuous hail of stones and was steadily improving, although he still got hit just as much, seeing as Lee increased the tempo gradually to match his progress. After their training, he got patched up by Hinata, though he made sure he wouldn't fall asleep again. Not that he really minded the extra sleep, but the lip he got from Kyuubi and Akai-chan after the first day was more than he was really willing to put up right now. 4 more days followed. Mostly the routine didn't vary. Naruto would practice his jutsus on the morning, and on afternoon he was subjected to guys dodging practice. He got patched up afterwards and did few light exercises on the evening coupled with some reading and whatnot. Akai for her part trained with summoned foxes in the art of moving about unseen, and during evening was practicing long-distance communications with Naruto. On the 4th day, Lee declared that it was time for the ultimate dodging test and that Naruto should remove his training weights so that they could really get a feel as to how much he had progressed. They were all quite surprised by the sheer speed that he was exhibiting while dodging almost every incoming rock. That was until Naruto decided to make several clones to join the stoning, clones that effectively pummeled him into unconsciousness with a double Iwa Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Stone Shadow Clone, blah blah blah. When he came to, Lee was pumping his fist in the air and graduated him with honors from Guy Sensei's excellent course of Dodging 101. He also jumped about excitedly and yelled that tomorrow would be the last day he was forced to restrict himself to only light physical exercise, and made a nice guy promise that he would help Naruto with his taijutsu practice like his youthfulness demanded. Both Naruto and Hinata sweat dropped slightly at this, but Naruto quickly recovered, thanking Lee. Hinata pointed out that she was given a clean bill of health earlier the day and that she would like to spar with Naruto too to give him more familiarity with the Hyuga Juken style. There was only one little thing. Anyo, Naruto-kun, I have a family matter that requires my attendance tomorrow. So if it would be alright, I would join you and Lee day after tomorrow. Naruto just waved her off. Sure thing, Hinata. I mean, I've been running you both ragged for the last week and you guys need your own time too. Besides, I've been training real hard for the past 3 weeks, so it might be a good idea for me to take a day off too. So I'll see you guys day after tomorrow, same time, same place, right? And Lee, I'll see you at the usual place 4:30, right? At that, Lee pumped his fist in the air and yelled, "Yush!" Truly the flames of youth burn fiercely in you, Naruto-kun, and together we will prove that genius of hard work can overcome a mere genius. With that, he took off in a blur of green, leaving Naruto and Hinata blinking at his antics. Grabbing Hinata's hand, Naruto began to lead her towards the town. "Nay, Hinata, how about we get some ramen to celebrate?" Hinata could only nod and follow the enthusiastic blonde while trying to enjoy the feel of his hand in hers to its fullest. Naruto stretched languidly and looked about while scratching his head lazily. He decided that a day off should start with a breakfast and proceeded to give Akai her minced meat and rice and served himself a hearty helping of cereals with cold milk and strawberry jam. 2 bowls of cereals, some 15 minutes and a cold shower later, he was heading towards Team 7's training ground on an intent to do some light exercises and test his clone's dodging abilities. Much to his delight, each clone lasted from half a minute up to full 2 minutes against him in single taijutsu only combat. He was just finishing his workout when Sakura showed up, wearing a tired and worried expression. She hadn't seen either of her teammates since the preliminaries and was worried sick about Sasuke, and to an extent Naruto. The boy in question frowned at the sight of his teammate and even more at the subdued tone of her voice when she greeted out, "Hey Naruto." He forced a smile on his face and yelled out, "Ohio Sakura-chan. You alright? You seem kinda tired or something. Been training hard since the prelims. That was a great fight, by the way." He trailed off. Something was wrong with Sakura. Seriously, normally she would have greeted him back and or yelled at him for asking such pointless questions. Naruto frowned. "Sakura-chan, what's wrong?" She sighed and sat down heavily. "I just feel so useless. I mean, I was the only one from our team who failed and now I don't even know where you guys are and I was worried." And Naruto frowned even more. He could deal with angry Sakura, or with Sakura the rabid Sasuke fangirl, but Sakura who was totally dejected, with eyes brimming with tears, was something out of his experience. How are you a failure, Sakura-chan? I mean, out of what 170-something genins from all the ninja countries, you were one of the 20 who made it to the prelims. Still no response. And you didn't even lose, you fought your opponent to a tie, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. He cringed slightly at the pain that was to come. I've been training in the woods over there and Sasuke Tem is with Kakashi-sensei so that he won't lose too badly to Gaara. He smirked. Almost there. You know, because that Tem is just a weak loser who thinks he's all too cool. There, that did it. He wheeled around and took off like a bat out from hell with a raging Sakura hot on his heels. After about 10 minutes of chasing Naruto around, it became obvious that she was running out of steam, so it was time for the next phase. Naruto ducked around a tree and quickly produced a clone to take his place as he hopped into the safety of a nearby tree. From his vantage point, he was mildly impressed in the clone's ability to dodge and evade Sakura's blows. However, all things came to an end and the clone vanished in a poof of smoke when a fist of doom impacted on its head. The look of bewilderment on Sakura's face was too much for Naruto and he made a fatal error of judgment. He fell from the tree while rolling in laughter. After a brutal beating followed, not really, Sakura was feeling too good to really pound the baka, so she just smacked him around a few times. Soon after, they were both sitting on the ground. "So Naruto no baka, you've been training. And do you know where Sasuke-kun is?" Naruto just shrugged at this. "Yeah, well, I know that Sasuke is off with Kakashi because I was going to ask Kakashi to teach me some stuff, but it's because of the Sharingan and all. I think the Tem is doing just fine." The blonde rubbed the back of his neck. I was actually here because it's my first day off since the prelims, so I just figured I'd do a light workout and all that. As for training, you won't believe who I got stuck with. Ero Sennin, he's the super pervert who writes those dirty books that Kakashi-sensei reads, you know, Ika Ika Paradise. Sakura blanched at this. Anyway, he's pretty strong and all, so I learned a few jutsus and then I've been practicing taijutsu mostly, and learning how to dodge so that my clones stay alive a bit longer. He stood up and pointed a finger at Sakura. Anyway, Sakura-chan, you should start training too. It's only half a year to the next Chunin exams and it's possible that neither me, nor Sasuke get promoted in rank, so you need to start preparing. And besides, with too much time on you hands you get all moody and stuff, training always works for me if I have too much time on my hands. You could try running up and down trees or ask someone who knows more about this stuff. Naruto waved at the gaping Sakura. Well, I'll get going and see if I can dig up some trouble or something. Make sure you come to cheer for us in the finals, see you there. Sakura just sat there watching as the Baka left to find trouble. Since when did Naruto start making sense? He's right though, maybe I should start training harder, maybe Sasuke-kun would like me more if I was stronger. With that and aloud, hell yeah. From inner Sakura, she decided to visit the library to find out some motivational, get strong quick, books. Naruto was wandering around aimlessly. He had been thinking about finding Konohamaru Corps and playing ninja with them but didn't quite feel like that anymore. He had suddenly realized that he hadn't even so much as thought about Sasuke before meeting Sakura. He realized that it wasn't about beating Sasuke anymore, it was all about beating Neji, hard. He was in so deep thought that he almost stumbled upon the lazy bum, Shikamaru, who was silently watching the clouds on a hill. He had almost panicky expression on his face when Naruto noticed him and he whispered out, Ino didn't send you, did she? Naruto just blinked and shook his head, making the other boy relax visibly. Good. I swear that bossy woman has been on my case 24/7. It's all about training, training, training and some more, so troublesome. She even bullied Asuma and Choji into training me. Naruto smirked at this. Blah, smirk away Naruto, I tell you she's got her eyes on you, just like she's got M on Sasuke. So after this troublesome exam is over she'll be off my case and onto yours. Naruto was starting to panic slightly at this but didn't have a chance to reply when a shrill, Shika-kun, where are you? Cut the air. Naruto didn't have even time to react when Shikamaru pulled him on the ground. We're doomed, it's Ino. You always managed to pull some escape trick after you pranked someone, so how about sharing? This is so troublesome. Naruto thought for a moment, then whispered something in a low tone to Shikamaru, who despite looking dubious nodded in agreement. Only moments later Yamanaka Ino came to a spot where three kids, she recognized them as the Hokage's grandson and his friends, were playing. Putting on a cutesy smile she asked, Hey Konohamaru-kun, have you seen a lazy genin hereabouts? One with a ponytail, sour expression and fishnet shirt. Ino's smile faltered little as Konohamaru flashed a grin and said, maybe, but that info will cost you. She was about to torture the facts out from the little blackmailer when an Anbu member made his appearance. Quickly patting Konohamaru on the head, she backed away lest the Anbu think she was going to attack the Hokage's grandson. The raven-masked Anbu just stood there for a moment and then said, Nara, the Hokage has demanded your presence. This confused Ino somewhat, but then the Anbu continued, that goes for you too, Uzumaki. There were three puffs and, much to Ino's dismay, instead of the Konohamaru Corps there were Shikamaru, Naruto and Akai. She quickly got really mad at them and was about to strangle the stupid boys when the Anbu continued yet again, it's about the finals, don't keep the Hokage